Hashtag Charles Bronson found his stuntman's son selling drugs. What he did next shocked everyone. The call came at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March 1976. Charles Bronson was in his study, reading through scripts for his next film, when the phone rang. "Charlie. It's me, Joe." Joe Castellano had been Charles's stuntman for 8 years. A tough Italian from the Bronx who could take a punch, drive a car through a brick wall, and make it look easy. But tonight, Joe's voice was shaking. "Joe, what's wrong?" "It's my boy, Charlie. My kid Tony. He's been arrested." Charles set down his script. Tony Castellano was 19 years old, a good kid who'd grown up on movie sets, always polite, always asking Charles about acting techniques and stunt work. "What happened?" "Drugs, Charlie. They caught him selling drugs outside Lincoln High School. The cops say he's been doing it for months." Charles felt his stomach drop. "How much trouble is he in?" 5 to 10 years, maybe more. They're talking about making an example of him because it was near a school." Joe's voice cracked. "Charlie, I don't know what to do. This kid was supposed to go to college. He was gonna be something better than me." "Where are you now?" "Downtown precinct. They won't let me see him until tomorrow. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Charles Bronson arrived at the police station to find Joe Castellano sitting on a bench in the lobby, his head in his hands. Joe was a big man, built like a linebacker, but tonight he looked small and broken. "Any word?" Charles asked, sitting down beside him. "Nothing. They got him in lockup with the real criminals. My boy's 19 years old, Charlie. He's never been in trouble before." Charles studied his friend's face. Joe had been married to his high school sweetheart for 22 years. They'd struggled to have kids, finally adopting Tony when he was 5 years old. The boy had become the center of Joe's universe. "Tell me what you know." Joe pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Detective gave me this. Says Tony was selling marijuana and pills to high school kids. Started small, but it got bigger. They think he was working for someone." "Working for who?" "Some dealer named Vince Torino. Runs drugs through half the high schools in the valley." Charles knew that name. Vince Torino was connected, not to the legitimate businessmen Charles knew through his work, but to the kind of people who solved problems with violence. "Joe, listen to me. This isn't just about Tony anymore. If he was working for Torino, he's in real danger. These people don't like loose ends." Joe's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to get your boy out of this mess before it gets worse." The next morning, Charles made a phone call to Mickey Cohen, a man he'd met years earlier through Frank Sinatra. Mickey had connections throughout Los Angeles, not all of them legal, but all of them useful. "Mickey, it's Charlie Bronson. I need a favor." "Charlie. What can I do for you?" "I need information on a dealer named Vince Torino. Word is he's been using kids to move product." There was a pause. "Torino's bad news, Charlie. Real bad news." "Why you asking?" "He got his hooks into the son of a friend of mine." "How deep is the kid in?" "Deep enough to be looking at 5 to 10. Mickey was quiet for a long moment. "Meet me at Cantor's Deli in an hour." "And Charlie?" "Come alone." An hour later, Charles sat across from Mickey Cohen in a back booth at Cantor's Deli on Fairfax. Mickey was a small man with sharp eyes and an expensive suit, the kind of person who knew everyone's secrets. "Here's what I know about Torino," Mickey said, cutting into his pastrami sandwich. "He's been recruiting kids from good families. Gets them hooked on the money, then threatens their families if they try to quit." "What kind of threats?" "The permanent kind. He's already made examples of 2 kids who tried to walk away." Charles felt his anger rising. "What happened to them?" "Car accidents. Both of them. Coincidence, the police said. And Tony Castellano? Mickey shrugged. Kid got arrested at exactly the right time. If he'd stayed on the street much longer, he'd probably be dead. Can you get me to Torino? Mickey looked at Charles like he'd lost his mind. Charlie, you're a movie star. You play tough guys. Torino is a tough guy. There's a difference. Not as much as you think. That evening, Charles visited Tony Castellano in jail. The boy looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Charles, he started crying. Mr. Bronson, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let you and my dad down. Charles sat down across from the boy in the visiting room. Tell me how this started, Tony. I needed money for college. Dad works hard, but stunt work doesn't pay that much, and I knew he was struggling. This guy approached me outside school, said I could make easy money. Vince Torino. Tony's eyes widened. How do you know about him? I know a lot of things, kid. What I want to know is how deep you're in. Tony was quiet for a moment. Pretty deep, Mr. Bronson. I was making $2,000 a week selling to kids at 3 different schools. Torino said I was one of his best. And now? Now I'm scared. Not just of going to prison. I'm scared of what Torino's gonna do when he finds out I got arrested. He doesn't like people who get caught. Charles leaned closer. Tony, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to do exactly what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. First thing, you're going to call your dad and tell him you love him. Second thing, you're going to trust me to handle Vince Torino. Mr. Bronson, you don't understand. This guy is dangerous. He's killed people. Charles smiled. It wasn't his movie smile, it was something colder, more real. Tony, I grew up in Pennsylvania coal mining country. I've been in fights with men who'd kill you for looking at them wrong. I've dealt with union bosses who made Torino look like a choir boy. And I've played vigilantes in movies for so long that sometimes the line gets blurry. He paused. Trust me. I can handle Vince Torino. 3 days later, Charles Bronson walked into Torino's office, a back room at a strip club in Van Nuys. He came alone, as requested, but not unarmed. He was carrying something more dangerous than a gun, information. Vince Torino was everything Mickey had described, small, wiry, with dead eyes and hands that were never still. He was flanked by 2 muscle-bound associates who looked like they'd been carved from concrete. Mr. Charles Bronson, Torino said, not getting up from behind his desk. The death wish guy. What brings a big movie star to my humble establishment? Tony Castellano. Torino's expression didn't change. Never heard of him. Sure you have. 19-year-old kid who was moving product for you until he got arrested. I don't know what you're talking about. Charles reached into his jacket pocket, ignoring the way the 2 bodyguards tensed. He pulled out a manila folder and tossed it onto Torino's desk. That's copies of phone records, financial transactions, and witness statements linking you to drug sales at 3 high schools. The FBI has been building a case against you for 6 months. Torino opened the folder, his face growing paler with each page. Where did you get this? I have friends. Some of them wear badges. Some of them don't. All of them owe me favors. What do you want? I want you to leave Tony Castellano alone. Forever. I want you to make it clear to everyone in your organization that the boy is off limits. And I want you to stop recruiting kids. Torino laughed. And if I don't? Charles leaned forward. Vince, that folder contains enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. Right now, it's sitting in 3 different safe deposit boxes around the city. If anything happens to Tony Castellano, if anything happens to his family, if anything happens to me, those files get delivered to the FBI, the DEA, and the Los Angeles Times. You're bluffing. Charles smiled again. Am I? You want to find out? Torino was quiet for a moment. You think you're some kind of tough guy because you play one in the movies? No, Vince. I think I'm a tough guy because I grew up tough. The movies just pay the bills. Charles stood up. Here's what's going to happen. Tony Castellano is going to serve his time, probably 18 months with good behavior. When he gets out, he's going to college. And you're going to pretend he never existed. And if I don't agree? Then you'll find out why they call me the Stone Face. Because when I set my mind to something, nothing changes it. Nothing. Charles walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Vince. Those two kids who had car accidents. The police might be reopening those cases. Amazing what witnesses remember when they feel safe to talk. 3 weeks later, Tony Castellano accepted a plea bargain that reduced his sentence to 18 months. The prosecution's case mysteriously weakened when their key witness, Vince Torino, refused to testify. Charles visited Tony in prison every month. They talked about movies, about life, about making better choices. Charles also arranged for Tony to take college courses while incarcerated, and when the boy got out, there was a full scholarship waiting for him at UCLA. Tony Castellano graduated with a degree in social work. He became a counselor for at-risk youth, helping kids who were headed down the same path he'd taken. But the real victory came 6 months after Tony's arrest. Vince Torino disappeared. Nobody knew exactly what happened to him. Some said he'd fled to Mexico. Others said he'd had an unfortunate encounter with some of his business associates. Charles never asked. He didn't need to know. Years later, in 1995, Charles was at a movie premiere when a well-dressed man approached him. It took Charles a moment to recognize Tony Castellano, now 38 years old, married, with 2 kids of his own. Mr. Bronson, I wanted you to meet my family. Charles shook hands with Tony's wife and knelt down to talk to his children. A boy and a girl, both around 10 years old. Mr. Bronson, Tony said quietly, I've never forgotten what you did for me. You saved my life. You saved your own life, Tony. I just gave you the chance to do it. No, sir. You did something more than that. You showed me what a real man looks like. Not someone who hurts people or makes money from other people's pain. A real man protects people. A real man stands up for what's right. Tony paused. Every kid I counsel, every life I help save, that's your legacy too, Mr. Bronson. That's what real strength looks like. Charles Bronson died in 2003. At his funeral, Joe Castellano delivered one of the eulogies. He told the story of how Charles had saved his son, not with guns or violence, but with courage and loyalty and the willingness to face down a dangerous man to protect a kid who'd made mistakes. Charlie taught me something, Joe said, his voice breaking. He taught me that being tough isn't about how much punishment you can take. It's about how much you're willing to risk to protect someone else's child. After the service, Tony Castellano approached the microphone. He was now the director of a youth center that had helped over 2,000 at-risk kids stay out of trouble. Charles Bronson played vigilantes in the movies, Tony said. But in real life, he was something better. He was a man who believed in second chances. He was a man who saw something worth saving in a 19-year-old drug dealer, and he risked everything to save it. Tony looked out at the crowd. That's not vigilante justice. That's something higher. That's grace. That's love. That's what heroes really look like. Today, the Tony Castellano Youth Center continues to operate in Los Angeles, helping kids who are tempted by easy money and bad choices. Above the entrance, there's a plaque that reads, "In honor of Charles Bronson, who taught us that real strength is using your power to lift others up. But in Tony's office, there's a simpler reminder, a photograph of Charles Bronson signed with these words, "To Tony, second chances are worth fighting for. Use yours well. Charlie." That's the Charles Bronson story that never made the headlines. The story of an actor who used his fame and connections not for publicity, but to save the son of a friend. Who faced down a dangerous criminal not with guns, but with information and courage. Because sometimes the most important role you can play is just being there when someone needs you. Sometimes the difference between a life saved and a life lost is one person who's willing to say, "Not this kid. Not on my watch." Charles Bronson understood that. And because he did, Tony Castellano got to grow up, get married, have children, and spend his life helping other kids who needed someone to believe in them. That's what real tough guys do. They don't destroy lives. They save them.